Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, about to be joined by my main man, Ken Wiebe from Sportsnet, as we are going to tee up the season with I'd like to call it the first show of the season, but I know that we did something at the beginning of training camp. But we're going to start getting into it really, back to normal here. We're going to find a sense of normalcy. I know we're not fully back to normal with the pandemic and COVID and all that kind of stuff, but we're going to get back to a sense of normalcy with Kenny and Renny here right away after this program. We're going to get into it with our post game shows, which are going to start off a little bit interesting because new this year I'm back on the Hockey Night in Canada and the national broadcast. So I'll be doing the broadcast for the season opener in Anaheim on next Wednesday. I'll be there, so it'll take me a little bit of time to get back to the hotel. Ken will get the show started that day, but we'll get back into it. Same thing, Saturday night, the first Hockey Night in Canada of the season, as the Jets take on San Jose as we travel further up the California coast there. I'll be there for both of those, and then after that, things will start to get a little bit back to normal as the travel slows down somewhat. But it's going to be an interesting year to be traveling and doing some of those games and getting to do Kenny and Renny afterwards. One of those games is going to be in Columbus, the first time that the Jets line up against Patrick Laine again. So that'll be an interesting one and a good one to be in Columbus. We'll always, if we can try and get Kenny there, we'll always try and do that. But speaking of Kenny, I've gone far too long without hearing Kenny's voice and hearing this song. So let's get at it. Here comes Kenny. My main man, Kenny Wiebe. How are you doing, my friend? Welcome back to the show. And I think the first thing you got to show everyone here is, yeah, there we go. Kenny Wiebe's got his very own Kenny and Renny shirt with his catchphrase on it. You know, if Kenny is yelling, "Wake up" at you, you've done something wrong. So he's going to be walking around the city with his "Wake Up" shirt, and people are going to be like, "What did I do? What did I do wrong?" But Ken, great to have you back. How are you doing, my friend?
Tremendous, Sean. Great to be sharing the airwaves. We've had an enjoyable training camp so far, but believe we're both looking forward to the season opening this week. I wish I was going to be joining you in California, but don't think that will be possible. But we will certainly be fired up and ready to interact with the masses here in those post-game shows, as you mentioned, and getting things going. It's going to be an exciting year ahead, and really going to enjoy our conversations as we always do.
I got to tell you, Ken, I'm really excited. I was on the phone with my boss right before this. You were on the phone with one of our bosses, and I had said to him, I think they want to check in. They want to make sure our mental health is right. And I'd said to him, like, my mental health is great because I'm excited. I'm really excited about this. One of the things I'm really excited about is getting back into doing the Kenny and Renny. You kind of notice how much work it was when like you take that break and you decompress for the summer and you kind of start to realize all the stuff you went through. I even know, and I'll tell you this right now, I'm doing the process. We do what we do. We talk with each other, and I go and I monitor the comments here. And one of the things I'm going to give a peek behind the curtains. One of the things I noticed is even when I had a week off last year, coming in and trying to do the show, have conversations with you, but monitor the chat room at the same time, it's tricky. It takes like mental sharpness, and I'm not the most mentally sharp guy at the best of times. So, people give me a little bit of leeway here to try and get back into things. People have saying I got to leave the comments up a little bit longer to make sure that people can read them. And so I'm going to try and make sure we get all those kind of things done. But I am super excited, Ken, because I'm going to tell you, being here with you in this room right now and with all the people, this is my happy place. I'm happy to be back. I'm super excited, and I'm super excited to tee up the season, which we're going to do here over the next hour. It was mentioned off the top of the show by one of our viewers. We've got Scott Billeck is going to be joining us along with Jeff Hamilton. I know that people want to hear from them because they were, not a fixture, but they were along for the ride for a lot of Kenny and Renny shows. And when we got the four of us together, we had some nice heated conversations, which is what we want. We want some action here. So they're going to be joining us at around 3:35, 3:40. In the meantime, we just want to get right into it. Ken, off the bat, I mean, we've kind of both shared, and I think if you've been watching Kenny and Renny, you have a good idea of how we feel about what the Jets were able to do in the offseason. But just give me, a quick idea of how you think Kevin Cheveldayoff did to address this team. And then give me an idea if you think the Jets, who very much believe in what Kevin Cheveldayoff did, they're already talking Stanley Cup. They're not afraid to talk about it. Have they earned the right to have that conversation and say that?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, Sean, I think the Jets have turned their defense potentially from a weakness to a strength. I mean, there's no doubt about that. We've seen firsthand how Nate Schmidt and Brendan Dillon are both fitting in on the ice. The off-ice portion is, limited to our media dealings, which are not in the room. We're not having one-on-one conversations, but from what we've seen, it's not just humor, right? It's not just humor that these guys are bringing in joy. These guys have fit right in. I think one of the comments that really stood out to me is that people feel like they've been here. They act like, they don't act like they've been here for a long time in terms of they have expectations on what should be done for them. They've really fit in seamlessly, and it feels like they've been here for, 5 or 10 years already. So I've been very impressed. It's easy to see that. We saw it on the podium with Josh Morrissey and Nikolai Ehlers the other day, that sort of joy levels being so high. We've seen a high pace in training camp, and I can't wait to see what it looks like against real competition. Yes, the other night was the first time where it was mostly NHL lineups going head-to-head, but I think it'll be super interesting once that puck drops on Wednesday at the Pond in Anaheim, where you'll be in attendance, and I think it's going to be fantastic. In terms of their contender status, to me, they're very clearly a contender. Can they battle Colorado and Vegas for first overall in the Western Conference? I mean, that is a little bit too early to tell, I think, but I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be able to be in that discussion. I mean, are they second? Are they sixth? I think they're closer to the top half of the conference in terms of those playoff teams than the bottom half. But again, we know the Central Division is a tough place to reside. There will be a feeling out period, Mark Scheifele talked about it several times. They haven't played the Colorado Avalanche for a long time, right? Cale Makar was just kind of, scratching the surface the last time that they saw the Colorado Avalanche. Yeah. So,
and now looks like one of the best defensemen in the league. Yeah,
right. Now he's a Norris contender. So for me, I think it will be super interesting. But again, now Pavel Francouz is injured for 4 weeks now. All of a sudden, what happens if Darcy Kemper? No one wishes injuries upon anyone, but Kemper has a history of missing time during the season. Now the safety valve is not really there, but there's enough talent there that they should be able to get by. But it'll be interesting to see. For me, the Jets have depth, they have talent, and they have experience. And some of that experience, Sean, we know from seeing it firsthand, is heartache, right? There's a lot of heartache mixed in with some of that joy that we were discussing. The team had a very up and down playoff, completing a sweep, then getting swept. That happens so rarely in the NHL. Those guys weren't getting ahead of themselves, and they weren't taking the Canadiens for granted, but I'm sure, like a lot of people, thought when they saw they were playing the Canadiens instead of the Leafs, they certainly thought they had a better chance to advance. So when it's over that quickly, there's a snap of a finger and the dynamic changes, right? Mark Scheifele's lost, Dylan DeMello's lost to an injury on the first shift, and all of a sudden the complexion completely changed basically before the game was 1 minute old in game one. So super interesting to me. I do think the Jets are a legitimate contender. Do they have questions? Of course, every team has questions. There's an entirely new fourth line. How are they going to contribute? Are they going to be 8-minute players? Are they going to be 12-minute players? How are guys going to respond? We'll dig deeply into that. But how about for you, Sean? Do you see them as a legitimate contender?
Well, I have them finishing second. So it's interesting that you put them right up there with Vegas and with Colorado. I don't think at this stage I've got them as high as those guys, right? I'd say those guys are in the same conversation.
Sure.
And the Jets are tugging at their shirt sleeves, right?
That's what I mean. I'm not saying they're at that level. I'm saying they're going. That's where they hope to get to.
Yeah, but I have the Jets finishing second in the Central Division, which I think puts them around third in that conference. So I mean, I think you're exactly right with that. It's interesting. I wanted to bring up a couple of the things that people said. One, I'm going to toot my own horn here just because I didn't get my picks in last year. If you remember our Sportsnet picks the year before,
Good reminder.
Picked,
Today's the deadline, buddy. Today's the deadline.
Never mind. They sent out the picks. I got it in like 3 minutes later. I was like, that's not happening again this year. I filled it out. I got it back. One of the things I wanted to bring up, and where was it here? One of our viewers, I think it's T. Conapoli, says that he's got the Jets and the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup final. I've got the Panthers. Here we go. T. Conapoli says Jets and Florida Cup picks. That's who I had going to the Cup. On the other side, I've got Florida going to the Cup out of the East. I've got Colorado going out of the West. That's what I had last year. And you and I, it's funny, we both had picks and we clashed in the second round there. Also, Cale Makar, I had last season in my picks that did not get in as my defenseman of the year candidate. I think he would have won it if he wouldn't have had that injury. I think he would have won it. So when you say that, I think there's a lot of people who maybe quietly are thinking that he's not at that level yet. I think he already reached that level. I think he was the best defenseman in the NHL last year. I don't think he gets the trophy. I don't think he gets the Norris Trophy because of that injury. But if you take a look at how his numbers stacked up, I think his numbers were ahead of Adam Fox's, and he would have got that if it weren't for that injury. It reminds me of the Calder Trophy race with Connor McDavid, when, in my mind, he was clearly the best. As good as Artemi Panarin was that year, in my mind, it was clear who the best hockey player out of that group was, and he doesn't get it because he's injured. I've got beef with that. We won't get into it, but I just wanted to go through a couple of those things. But yeah, you're right. I take a look at the Winnipeg Jets, and I think for them to put themselves in that conversation, they have to do it because they're confident, right? And every team is going to walk into the year and say, our goal is to win the Stanley Cup. You're not a professional if you don't do that. But it's a kind of our job to wade through who is legit, who isn't. I take a look at the Jets. I don't think they're quite there yet. And I think that that's going to play out over the season. But I do think that we can get into roster construction later. Mm-hmm. Last year, so many of our conversations going into the trade deadline, Ken, were about the Jets needing to hit a home run by going and getting a top flight defenseman. They never did that. And I think that that's part of what happened to them down the stretch, although I think there was more than just that to it. The Montreal Canadiens, we can say what we want about Mark Scheifele going out, Dylan DeMello not being available. I think for me, the Canadiens proved beyond a doubt that they, in the playoffs, were the class of that I want to say the West. It doesn't work out that way. It's kind of the way that things went. But, when you put them up against what they were able to do against Vegas and what they were able to do against the Jets, they left no doubt about it in my mind that even with Mark Scheifele in that lineup, they were heads and shoulders above the Jets in that series. So there's some things to be answered there. But this Jets roster construction last year went into the year thinking if we do well, we need some really big fixes to the roster to get to where we want to. That's not the case this year. And the question marks that they do have, which we'll get into later, backup goaltender, bottom six, maybe bottom four is a better way to say it. Those are things that can be corrected a lot easier at the trade deadline for cheaper. And those kind of players are a lot more available. If the Jets don't get what they quite need out of their fourth line this season, well, a guy like Eric Stahl, who the Canadiens picked up last year and became part of that formidable fourth line for the Canadiens, those are the kind of guys that are available for fairly cheap that the Jets can look to go out and get if they want to bolster their roster at that time. So I think at this time and going throughout the season, I think there's going to be a bit of a separation between the Jets and the Colorado Avalanche and the Vegas Golden Knights, who I think are still the class of the West. But I think that they're within reach, and that the Winnipeg Jets, with the right additions and playing the right way in the playoffs, have every right to suggest that they can come out of the West alongside those other teams.
The other thing, Sean, that we've talked about a lot with players and head coach Paul Maurice is that with the new additions and the bolstering of the blue line, the Jets will be much closer to playing that aggressive game that we saw in 2017-18, 2018-19, they don't have quite as dynamic a back end as they did when Dustin Byfuglien and Jacob Trouba were there, but they do have good puck movers. They will spend less time in the defensive zone, and that will help get the puck into the hands of those elite level forwards and allow them to maybe enhance their offensive production without abandoning their plan in the defensive zone, which we know is something they've had to work incredibly hard at. But I think that their aggressive style is going to help them as a team and also as individuals. Guys like Josh Morrissey will really benefit. Nate Schmidt looks like he's got his confidence back. He's been very active. And I think that it's going to be also the element of toughness, Sean, that physical element that Brendan Dillon will bring, I think is an important quality that the Jets were not necessarily lacking, but certainly didn't have an abundance of, if you will.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because was it you I had this conversation with? I know we saw what he did on that first scrimmage. I mean, that guy, you got to keep your head up when he's out there on the ice. And I know that the Jets wanted that. I know they wanted bigger guys. I know that Logan Stanley is going to take a step forward this year. I think Logan Stanley showed a real capability of being a guy that took the other team off their game. You'd see so often the other teams would be focusing in on him and responding to hits that he'd done. And I thought he did a good job getting in their heads. I think he's going to do that more this year. So those are two twin towers on the back end that I think are really going to affect that. But I don't know that I would look at this Jets team and say that this is going to be a hard Jets team to play against. Now, I say that because in the past, and I'll just get this quick because I know you're going to want to bounce back on this, but in the past, you used to talk to opposing teams and opposing coaches, and they'd say coming into Winnipeg, it was like, one, the Jets were at that time either the second biggest or the biggest team in the league. They were hard to play against. Dustin Byfuglien was going around doing his thing, just big, strong teams that affected other teams in that way. And then you get the crowd on top of it. And now suddenly Winnipeg's a really intimidating building to play in. I don't think that other than Dillon and Stanley, who are going to, maybe you don't need too much of that, but I don't necessarily think that you're going to walk into this to play the Jets this season and they're a team that you worry about playing against. Maybe there's not that many of those teams left to play against, but part of that, Ken, is the third line that you've got Adam Lowry, who's hard to play against. But if it's constructed as the way we've seen it right now, I don't necessarily think Paul Stastny is a guy that you're worried about playing against. And if Christian Vesalainen's on the other side, he's big, but does he play that game where he wears on you? Where is it in the rest of this roster that you would ever come in and be worried about playing the Winnipeg Jets, or that the Winnipeg Jets were going to grind you down unless you're talking with speed?
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, that's a fair comment. I would just say the Jets are going to be tough to play against, but it's not the way that we talked about in 2015 when those series with the Anaheim Ducks were, well over 100 hits in those games. The Jets aren't going to necessarily grind you down with the fourth line that's, constructed like Pat Maroon or guys like that, but they are hard to play against because of their speed, and they could be ferocious on the forecheck. And back to that aggressive nature that we talked about, Paul Maurice, you asked Paul Maurice directly, and we both know exactly what he meant when you asked him about it. Some things are going to take some time to show up. Well, the Jets are going to be pinching ferociously at the blue line. That seemed right. That is, without saying it, he basically said it. So that certainly was what I was thinking of when that answer was given to your question. I think they'll be much more aggressive, and because of their transition game and their speed, specifically when we're talking about Kyle Connor and Nikolai Ehlers, the Jets will be able, if they get pucks turned over at, in that neutral zone at each of those blue lines where those danger zones are, Sean, they will be dangerous because of how explosive they can be. No better example than the other night. It wasn't on a turnover, but with that reverse when Kyle Connor just left the puck for Ehlers, he went end to end and absolutely blasted a howitzer over the shoulder of Dan Vladar. That's where the Jets are dangerous, and they're tough on the. They don't have Matthew Perreault, who created all that chaos on the forecheck. Mason Appleton was a good forechecker, but I think the Jets will be tough to play against in other areas, and I also think that too. I know you're not doing that, but Dillon's ability to clear the front of the net is so important, and he's got that meanness element to him, and that's not a knock on Derek Forbort, but Forbort was a big guy, but he wasn't throwing a ton of big hits, and he didn't have that as mean element where you get that cross check in the ribs or whatever else. So I do think they'll be tougher to play against in those regards. And as you mentioned, with the Logan Stanley being such a bigger guy, he's just learning how to be physical. But that hit he had on Draisaitl in the playoffs, like things like that, if he can continue to elevate his game that way, that will make them hard to play against. But you're right. I mean, they're not a team that's, a couple of years ago was St. Louis, right? They had skill, but, you knew you were in for a battle with them, even dating back to 2016 Western Conference Final. Yes, the San Jose Sharks beat them, but they got beaten to a pulp and then had nothing left by the time they reached the final against the Pittsburgh Penguins. So the Jets aren't going to be tough to play against on that front necessarily. They will be hard to play against because of their elite skill level. And I would put Pierre-Luc Dubois in this equation as well. He's big and strong. Again, he's not going to be going around running guys, but the ability to win those board battles and puck battles with the healthy Pierre-Luc Dubois, I believe you're going to see that happen. And back to your point about Lowry's line, Paul Maurice flat out went out and said it. They're not necessarily going to be the hard match line. Exactly. I think that you're going to see Pierre-Luc Dubois' line get some of those hard matchups. The thing that he kind of shied away from in the playoffs, Sean, quite openly, not wanting to necessarily use Dubois like the Columbus Blue Jackets did against Tavares and Matthews. I think Paul Maurice is going to lean on the Dubois line for some of those harder matchups, and then you're going to see a guy like Nikolai Ehlers really flourish, because a lot of times those other teams' skilled lines aren't necessarily very dependable necessarily on the defensive side of things. So a lot to get over, and I just don't see the Jets being run out of the rink, right? So I mean, we're going to see what happens there, but that's my initial gut feeling about this group. But I think that they're not going to have a lot of issue on that front, but they won't get run out of the rink, but they're also not going to be intimidating people by their big and physical and brawny type of game. There's no doubt about that.
Well, here's my concern with that, Ken. And I'm going to say, you brought up St. Louis, and that got me thinking along this train, but it's a copycat league. St. Louis goes in and grinds their way to a Stanley Cup victory, and the team that came closest to them in that year was the Dallas Stars, who ground their way to the Stanley Cup Finals the next season against the Tampa Bay Lightning, who have shown against teams that we talked about it at length in the playoffs last year. The thing that makes Tampa Bay so good is they can outskill you, but they can outgrind you too, and they showed that by being able to beat a team like the New York Islanders 2 years in a row in 7 games, and doing so with a lot of grinded out 1-0 games. And I take a look at it like this, Ken. We talk about the Colorado Avalanche, who I think are the class of the league if you're just looking at on paper. But if you take a look at them losing to Vegas, Vegas outground them. Vegas was bigger and stronger, and they outground them, and they won that series. The Montreal Canadiens beat the Jets. They were bigger and stronger, and they outground them. And then the Montreal Canadiens, who were not supposed to be there, went to go play the Vegas Golden Knights and outground them. And so I'm wondering about this, and I'm going to just pose the question to you. The Jets are going in a direction where they're talking about moving to a degree away from that game. Yes, Dylan brings that element in. I don't necessarily think Nate Schmidt does. He's a big guy. I don't think he plays that.
He plays a physical game. Aggressive. Not a big hitter, but he's aggressive. He plays an aggressive game. He doesn't shy away from contact.
Sure. But you yourself have just said that they've acknowledged the fact that Lowry's line, which used to be the blunt instrument that the Jets beat their opposition over the head with, is not looking like it's going to be that. And so the idea of going to be a fast team, one of the reasons I'm sold on the Jets finishing behind Colorado and being in the top 3 in the Western Division is because I think that speed is going to be hard to contend with for 82 games. I think they're going to do great. But the question that I pose to you, the Jets going in that direction, with what we've seen the trend of this league over the last 3 years and the teams that succeed in the playoffs, have the Jets turned themselves into that team that is going to do great in the regular season and potentially not be able to get it done in the playoffs, because the playoffs is a grind game and the Jets look to be moving away from that?
Yeah, to me, I don't see that happening, Sean. I think let's not kid ourselves with Tampa. Yes, they had some players that played a physical style at the bottom of their lineup, but they're a skilled team, highly skilled. Colorado, highly skilled team. What happened to Vegas? They got goalied. I don't think that necessarily they got ground into the ground.
I disagree with that 100%, but go on.
No problem. That's okay. I mean, we don't always agree. They got out goalied. Price stood on his head in that series. They couldn't score. I mean, Vegas has plenty of guys that can play a physical game. I don't think they got run out of the rink. Alex Pietrangelo certainly wasn't impeded by his progress in that series at all. Their offensive guns didn't show up in the series. That's what happened there. They never got
to the front of the net. They weren't tough enough to get to the front of the net against that Canadiens team, as most teams that lost to the Canadiens weren't, including the Jets.
Sure. I mean, Price was the best goalie in the series.
He was great. I'm not saying Carey Price didn't play a role, but I don't think that was a series that Vegas was clearly the better team. In fact,
that's not what I'm saying. I just also don't think they got run out of the rink. They didn't get run out of the rink. That's not why they lost. They couldn't score. That's why they lost.
Boy, Kenny's water bottle all over you early.
Yeah, he's having a good effort here.
Yeah, no, that's
he's gonna have to show him. He's gonna have to show himself when we have a little group meetup at some point here.
That's the hope. That's the hope that we're getting to there. So here, let's go back to.
Anyways, I know exactly what you're saying, Sean. I'm just saying that I don't think we're going back to a time where teams are going to win because your lunch bucket guys are better. The lunch bucket guys help you get over the top, but you have to have elite level skill in order to get there. And the Jets are not a shy team. They're not afraid to mix it up. They're not going to be going crazy on that front. But I don't see that being.
Infinity comment is right on your comment, right? Like I'm in the end, the reason why the Tampa Bay Lightning beat the Montreal Canadiens is because they're a more skilled team, right? So you're right. I'm wondering about this team's ability, and I agree with this too. I'm wondering though about this team's ability to play skill and grind at the same time, because that's what I think it takes to get it done in the playoff. And I think it's funny we bring this up because I do not think that this issue that we're talking about at this moment is going to rear its head now until next April and May, because that's when we'll find this out. I think what we're going to find out here is that the Jets are a team that the speed that they're playing with, the aggression that they play with, to your point, which makes me think, well, everything that I've heard, well, let's go to this point. Everything that we've heard from this point, Paul Maurice, when I hear him talk about how he wants this team to play, I know it's not exactly because the players would say otherwise. There's new stuff that they're doing here. You can tell by comments Mark Scheifele made today about the things that they need to do to kind of play and open up with more speed. But it sounds an awful lot like the game plan that they were playing back in 2018. Does it not to you?
Oh, for sure. And that's all personnel related. We've talked about this. I mean, the Jets couldn't play that style with the players they had last year. So I agree. They're definitely going to be more aggressive, and I think that will work to their benefit. I just don't think that the Jets are going to be in a position where they're getting run out of the rink. That's all I'm saying. And I know that's not what you're suggesting either. And of course, there has to be an ability to shut games down. And that's the other thing that we can't forget about Montreal. It wasn't that they just shut you. It wasn't that they ran you out of the rink. I just think they suffocated their opponent by how stingy they were defensively. And of course, a big part of that was having Shea Weber and Ben Sherratt and Joel Edmondson keep the front of the net clear, right? That's true. I mean, do the Jets have 3 of those guys right now? I don't think so, but they have more than they did last year, right? They have at least 2, and they have some other guys that are proficient at it. So, but you're right. I mean, you got to prove it when it counts, right? We're not going to have a lot of these answers until later on. But I do think guys I think Mark Scheifele is well within, a reasonable expectation that this is the year for me, Sean, where Mark Scheifele goes from 82-point player to 100-point player. Nikolai Ehlers, I wrote about him on sportsnet.ca today. I casually used the number 40. I think Nikolai Ehlers hits 40 plus. Like, can he touch 50? I wouldn't say that it would be out of the equation for him to hit 50, but I do think that he's 40 plus this year. And then Kyle Connor. I mean, Paul Maurice didn't necessarily bite when I was asking him about it. Is Kyle Connor a 35-goal scorer or is he a 45-goal scorer? We don't know that, but those are the types of players that Tampa also helped win with. Like having that's like having Kucherov and Braden Point, and then you still have Steven Stamkos potentially playing on your third line minutes. So Do they have guys that can play the role of Yanni Gourde and Blake Coleman? Well, that's what we're going to find out about the Jets. I mean, that's the beauty of the equation here. We've seen a lot of young guys step forward, but can they step forward both during the year and then make those kind of contributions? Like Evgeny Svechnikov has been excellent. Can he sustain it over the course of the year? And can Svechnikov be a guy that, somehow works his way into that third line right wing role and provide that big body? We've been so impressed by his shot, Sean, but you and I both, first day of the pro camp, this is a guy that brings some size to the table. You got a shot like that, but he also wasn't afraid to mix it up. Remember when he mixed it up with Tyrell Bauer on one of those first drills on that first day? You love to see that from him. So
he got into it with Josh Morrissey, which I had a conversation with Josh Morrissey about. And that I thought was pretty interesting. Asked Josh about it, and Josh had said, basically, and he brought it back to, do you remember last year at training camp when he had talked about how he and Blake Wheeler had conversations before camp?
Right.
Blake Wheeler was like, come at me, bro. Like, he wanted Josh Morrissey to throw everything he had at him at camp. And his idea being, I don't get better unless I'm challenged. And so Josh Morrissey brought it back to that and talked about Svechnikov and said, this guy's coming in, he's fighting for a spot. And this is what you love to see. This guy who I don't know is not only going to come into camp and fight to make our team, but he's going to make me better in the process. Welcome to the club, guy. That is exactly the mindset that he had. And to your point, there's another guy that has size, you know what I mean, has a little bit of an edge to him. Yep. That's something that can add to what we're talking about here in this discussion of how hard this Jets team is to play against. We saw them kind of bounce back with Coleman, a guy, you talk all about the Tampa guys and the skill that they have, but you saw completely in that last game against Calgary why Coleman was so effective in those two runs. Because, that guy takes the game and makes it about the crazy stuff that he's doing to you and has that capability of taking the other team off their game.
For sure, but I would counter by saying I love the way that Jansen Harkins responds. We know that Jansen Harkins isn't a guy that throws down very often, but the fact that he was willing to go with Blake Coleman, basically, we were both watching it. It looked like they might go when they come out of the box. They didn't end up doing so, but I love the fact that he didn't back down and he went at him on that one other shift and gave him a cross-check right back. So I think that's an important part of the game, and I think Jansen Harkins has had just a fantastic camp, and I'm very interested to see where where things shake down for him. Is he, he looks like he'll start on the fourth line, but maybe he's on the third line before long. So for me, he's the kind of guy that knew what was asked of him. Paul Maurice basically flat out said, Jansen Harkins better come in with a mentality of making the team. You know what he did? He went in and came out and was one of the better forwards in the competition for those 4 jobs on the fourth line, basically. So I think it'll be super interesting to see how that plays out. But man, he's shown some great skill. We've seen those flashes of skill from Jansen Harkins, but this is a huge opportunity for him this year coming into the season. He's got a big opportunity in that final preseason game where it looks like he'll start on the top line with Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor.
You bet. Kenny, I just got a Twitter shout out from our good friend Pekka Jalonen for wearing my Yoga Eat t-shirt. He's one of the guys I think of all the time when I put that bad boy out. I'm going to say it right now. We've had discussions about this, but Pekka is a guy, as long as he says yes, we're going to have on one of our Kenny and Renny long forms, because Pekka is a guy who definitely likes to get the bees in people's bonnets in this market. The conversations he has about the Finnish players. What's his line? Instead of the double D system, the draft and develop, he calls it in Winnipeg the draft and destroy. We know he wasn't happy about how Sami Niku was handled, about how Patrick Laine was handled. There's an interesting conversation there to be had about the real Finnish flair that this team was drafting for a while and where a lot of those players have ended up and where the organization has gone. That's a conversation we got to end up having. But I got to have a quick one here before we get, and then we'll probably bring Hammy and Scott Billeck in on this. I want
just one quick thing for Hot Lunch. We know that the Olympics are an important thing. We're just not going to be able to get to it today on our season preview. We do think the Jets have a number of players who will be in the Olympics. We know that Eiler was named to the team, obviously after basically not quite single-handedly getting his country into the Olympics for the first time on the men's side. But we'll definitely be digging in on that topic a little bit more. I mean, I asked Kyle Connor about it today. We know Connor Hellebuck is involved in those discussions, and Mark Scheifele will be all as well. But that's a topic we'll dig into a little bit more down the road here. But just wanted to let you know that we're not ignoring you, but we're just not going to be able to sink our teeth into that today based on how the show is probably going to evolve here with the guys joining us.
Well, and we'll have to get into that because I had a conversation with Mark Scheifele about the Olympics, and he brought up something I thought was absolutely fascinating, which I think is a real good case for him to make this Canadian Olympic team.
That's a good tease for the season opening broadcast right there. That's what we
call
it in the industry.
All you out there who are watching, if you're back for that show, and if that's what you want to talk about, we'll get into that, bring it up at that time, try and have us remember that. And I was going to get into this topic, but it's exactly 35 after, which is when I asked Jeff Hamilton and Scott Billeck to join us, and here they are. So we might as well get into it right now. Does Hammy and Scotty get a wake-up T-shirt just for joining the show? No, but they'll probably have Ken scream wake up at them some point during the show here. Kenny's swear word, as Jeff Hamilton likes to call it. Boys, how are you doing? How are you guys doing?
Good over here. Yeah, I'm looking forward to happy that Kenny and Renny is back. Happy that this is back. You know, this is it's my favorite time to throw down. So looking forward to being on.
Yeah, for sure. Ken and I are trading, but you hit the button, Ken, if you want to do that. Scotty, how are you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's nice. It's cold here in Calgary, but I'm happy. So good to be back again, another season. So.
Well, let's tie into a topic that I'm sure our audience is going to love talking about here. Let's get into Nick Ehlers and his progression as a hockey player and his usage. It's always a hot topic of conversation. I'll start with you, Jeff. Nick Ehlers, I personally think he is elevating his game into the realm of superstar, which makes you have to ponder the idea of where a superstar fits into a lineup that has already a lot of superstars in it. What have your thoughts been on how Nick Ehlers has been brought along and where you see the Jets taking him and where you see that they should be taking him?
Good question. I mean, I think I really, obviously Nick Ehlers, I mean, you say superstars. I don't love that word. I think that's designated for, the few in the league, but I would say driver. And when we talk about importance to teams, we talk about importance to individual lines, we talk about the guys that drive. And for years, we've been asking the question whether or not Mark Scheifele is a driver. Does he make them, other players around him better? Can he play between, guys that aren't as skilled? And Nick Ehlers, to me, where he's evolved over the last couple seasons is he's gone from that, I don't want to say complimentary piece, like he wasn't skilled in a line, to a guy on a line that drives it. I mean, he's a guy who's capable of turning a game on its head. I mean, we've seen it in the preseason a bit, obviously against lesser competition, but we certainly saw it last year in that, he would be a guy that when the Jets needed that push, when the Jets needed that goal, he would find it. I mean, we all know his speed. We all know his ability to transition. As far as usage goes, this is the big thing for me on that question. I'm not going to sit there and disagree with people who say, Nick Ehlers needs to be on PP1, needs to have more ice time. His numbers suggest that he deserves all of that and more. He deserves to be part of. I love this part of the chat too, because you throw a question and everyone just is looking at the comments.
Ruins your point.
It's like no one's listening.
I'm listening to you. Hey,
I can see the face, but the usage with Ehlers is that, because here's the thing. I mean, you can make all those arguments that he deserves more ice time, that he deserves, a bigger role in the power play, and he's gotten that at certain points in times. He just maybe hasn't got it consistently. Do you wonder, can he handle more minutes? Can he handle more responsibility, or have they found the sweet spot for him? Now, if you're asking my opinion, I think he needs more. I think that sweet spot can improve. I'm with Kenny. I think we see a big season from him this year. I think we see him pop in, people know who Nick Ehlers is, but I think he's going to get an even bigger audience with the season he's going to have. But I think that's going to be dependent on, where he gets his usage this year. We look at Mark Scheifele's line as being the number one center, and we see him as the, that guy as the number one line. But I think when we start seeing the ice time, when we start seeing who goes over the bench, if Nick Ehlers is on a line and Pierre-Luc Dubois can figure things out, there's no reason why they shouldn't be the top line given what Nick Ehlers has done and what we're expecting him to do this season.
Interesting. Scott, is that too strong of a statement right there? By the way, I wanted to say before I move on, Jeff, that was a real preseason excuse you used there. Kenny and Renny, you come on here. It's the four of us, but it's the fans too. If you can't handle it,
I did not buy it.
We're going to have to find someone who can.
I look at the three of you, and you're all looking down, either checking yourselves out or looking at the comments. That's all I'm saying. This is supposed to be a round table. I'm looking for affirmative nods when I say things, not guys half in, half out of the conversation. Let's get back to broadcasting here, okay? Be pros.
Pull it together, Hamilton. Come on.
Yeah,
all right, Bill.
Hey, and we can also do two things at once here, okay? We can listen and read. Come on, buddy.
Okay,
Come on, buddy.
Well, I've seen all of you guys and seen your work, so I'm not 100% sure. So let's go.
Scotty Hammy says that with Hammy says that with Pierre-Luc Dubois on that line, potentially bouncing back, and Nick Ehlers doing what he's able to do, they could be the top line on this team. Is that too strong a statement?
Historically, probably, but I don't think it's too strong of a statement. No, I mean, I just, historically speaking, the way that Paul Maurice runs his lines is not that. That's not the case. But and he likes Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele together. So I mean, I think that the thing that would happen would be that Nikolai Ehlers would get the bump up, if anything. But again, I had this argument. I wasn't an argument. It was a good conversation with this guy on a plane last night about this who kind of first of all recognize me from your show, which is great. I'll take the exposure any way I can get it. But
boy, Scotty,
it. But it was interesting because he's like, well, why doesn't Paul Maurice give Ehlers more time? Why doesn't he play on power play one? But if you listen to both Ehlers and Paul Maurice, what's wrong with the happy medium of Ehlers playing 18 to 20 minutes a night on the second line? If he scores 40 goals doing that, are fans upset? Are you really holding a guy back from 50 if he's not playing an extra 2 minutes a night? I don't know. And the other thing is, what's wrong with having a team with two very good penalty or power plays that are going to go toe-to-toe with each other internally? Because we saw that last year, right? I mean, it went from 90 seconds for Scheifele's line or power play unit to a minute each, kind of halfway through the season. And it came to a point where both lines and Ehlers essentially sees that as his power play unit and likes it. So why I think we have to also sit back and listen to what the players and the coaches say. I mean, these guys know what they're talking about. And obviously we can argue it and the fans have their opinions. But if Ehlers likes playing on power play 2 and likes being in that spot there, why not leave him there? I don't see why it always has to be. The Jets have this wealth of talent, right? You can put, 3 good forwards on each power play, or 4 forwards on the first one, and how they're doing it. Basically 7 forwards on their power plays across the board and have 2 very good units. So why not spread the wealth out and be a 1-2 punch instead of, just overloading everything? And so that's, I guess, the argument against it. And if Ehlers likes where he is where he is, and he said it, whether he's telling the truth or not, I don't know. Ehlers has always been a bit of an honest guy in terms of what he says. So I don't have an issue with it that the fans do. And I had this conversation, like I said, with a guy on a plane. He was like, yeah, it makes sense. Because if a guy is playing in a sweet spot that he feels is the sweet spot, then maybe. And now, do you want to push a guy like Ehlers further and more? And can you extract more out of him? You can try it. But if it doesn't work, I mean, I don't see the issue. And so I don't feel that there's a need, unless Blake Wheeler really takes a step back this year, to start pushing for top line Ehlers. If Dubois' line, like Jeff said, kind of morphs into kind of that 1B or maybe even the 1A, who knows? But I don't think you have to reinvent the wheel with Ehlers, because he's very good where he is, and I'm not sure. I don't know what the ceiling is above that, but he's very good. Where he is that right now. So
Scott brings up a lot of good points, Ken. One of them being that Ehlers is saying he's happy where he is. My counter to that would be Nick Ehlers, who's very honest about his own game. I've never once heard him ever criticize or say that he's not happy with the ice time he gets. He strikes me as the kind of guy that if the coach says this, he's going to be okay with it. Have the Jets, I guess I'll put it to you like this, Ken, have the Jets explored enough the ceiling that Scott is talking about? The idea that maybe maybe he's in the right wheelhouse for the amount of minutes he's playing, but maybe if he was given the opportunities that you are giving some of the other players on this team, that he couldn't do that role even better than some of those players.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question, and it's a natural one for a lot of people to ask, for sure. But what I would say is that there was a time earlier on in Nikolai Ehlers' career where 16, 17 minutes was the sweet spot. But I do think, I mean, I know Hammer doesn't like the word, but I think he is on the verge of showing the NHL that he is a superstar, an elite player. He has elite speed. Like, he's one of the guys that is only in the conversation with Connor McDavid in terms of his high-end talent and speed. So I'm not saying he's going to be a 120-point player, but I think Nikolai Ehlers is a guy that is going to flourish this year. Earlier in his career, Paul Maurice did him a solid by hiding him in that third hole over the board so he could play against third-pairing defensemen and often against third-line players. That's true, and he needed it then. I don't think he needs to protect Nikolai Ehlers anymore. I think he needs to embrace the fact that he can go head-to-head with a lot of guys. I'm not here advocating and saying add 5 minutes a game to his talent or to his schedule, to his TOI. What I am also saying, and for all the people that are going crazy, I asked Paul Maurice directly if he considered putting Ehlers on power play 1. This is an easy thing, guys. We all know it. The reason why Ehlers is not on power play 1 is because he plays the exact same position as Mark Scheifele does in that spot. Can the Jets move Mark Scheifele to the slot where he was very effective and efficient before? Sure, but now it's running a lot differently. Now you're not getting touches for Mark Scheifele. We've seen Mark Scheifele during training camp. He worked on his one-timer. He is absolutely blasting shots from that point in a similar fashion to the way Patrick Laine did that before. Nikolai Ehlers is at his most effective when he's playing that essentially left-wing spot where he wheels, button hooks at the top, and comes in and either fires a shot or goes cross-ice. So could you try Nikolai Ehlers in the one-timer slot on his offside? Maybe, but he likes to be the central figure on that power play 2 unit, and the thing that needs to happen now is that it needs to be basically an open competition where it's a minute each. It was like that for a while last year, and then Ehlers got hurt and it went back to 90 seconds or 95 seconds, and then the other team was getting, or the other unit was getting scraps, even though they were producing at a higher level. So I am with Hammer in the fact that I think there's a potential to be a 1A, 1B situation. And as I talked about with Sean before the guys joined us, I think that it's the Dubois line that's going to be getting a lot of those matchups coming up, the head-to-heads. Yeah, they're going to be getting the head-of-year matchups. And by virtue of getting those matchups, their minutes are going to be going on the rise. And if the Jets are chasing a game, could Ehlers be bumped up onto the top line? Of course, but let's see how it plays out here. Going back to the original question, Sean, I think Ehlers' minutes are on the rise. Do I think they go from 17 to 20? That I'm not sure about, but he's going to be, his new sweet spot is going to be, I think, 18.5 to 19 rather than 16.55. So and that's deserved.
Yeah, your point about the power play, Ken, I think is an important one. That second line power play is designed around getting Nick Ehlers open to pick up that puck off the curl off the blue line, so he's heading towards the net with speed and space. That's their option 1, their option 2, their option 3, their option 4, and then we start getting into a shot from the point or maybe getting it down. So I like where Nick Ehlers is on the power play because he has a power play that is designed entirely around him. You couldn't do that on that other power play. There's too many big guns. It would take too much time away from him. My beef is what you were talking about. When they use those 2 power plays 1 minute each, that's fine. But when that top power play starts creeping into the we're going to take $1.30, to me, they're just taking time away from Nick Ehlers. I think not only do they need to find a way to balance that, but I think one thing that they should be doing with that Ehlers power play, which they do sometimes, I don't think they do it nearly enough, is when they're firing on all cylinders, have them come out first. That should be the number 1 power play when they're hitting properly. And I think that that's kind of the gatekeeper aspect of the established guys, the core of this team, the Wheelers and the Scheifeles and so on and so forth, that there's a little bit of a point, kind of a glass ceiling that you cannot pass at some point. And that brings me to
Sorry.
a question.
One last quick one on that point. One of the last issues that why people want Ehlers on PP1 is that on occasion they struggle with the zone entries. So you have a one-man zone entry machine available to you on that unit that they're not utilizing. But that's more to do with the fact you can still be the zone entry machine with that second unit. But that also means the Jets need to do a better job of their entries with the top unit.
Yeah. So now the other point I wanted to make here, and it's going to bring up, I know that Jeff Hamilton doesn't like when we refer to him as a superstar, much like he doesn't like having to read the comments when he's trying to talk. I don't know whether
I don't have access to the comments. But if we haven't made it clear, okay, whatever.
I asked Paul Maurice earlier in camp about with Nick Ehlers ascending in a direction of being a superstar, what kind of things he has to take into account. And I got to admit, I have a little bit of a beef with the way he answered the question. He posed it like this. On Tampa Bay, that has this dearth of talent that Ken was talking about earlier in the show, he said a guy like Steve Stamkos has to realize that he has to make time for the Braden Points of the world, the Nikita Kucherovs, and sometimes Steve Stamkos is the guy that is going to be playing third line style minutes or is going to be used in a third line manner to make room for this other talent. My problem, I get that. I get the idea of you need to find ways to get talent in there. But Nick Ehlers, the comparable on that team is not Steve Stamkos, the older guy who's had his best days and is still a very good player, but some guys he's got to get out of the way to make room for other guys. Nick Ehlers is the guy you need to be getting out of the way to make room for. And so I've got a little bit of I think it's telling that Paul Maurice said that, because what Paul Maurice is saying, what I'm hearing when I hear him say that is Nick is great, but he's got to make sure that guys like Blake Wheeler and Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor have the space to operate the way I want them to operate. And I think that the one thing, like I said, that glass ceiling that we're talking about, I think there's a mindset of those players that end up time and time again on that top line that it's their team first and everyone else is kind of helping out. And I do think that I agree with a lot of the ways that Nick Ehlers brought along slowly, but I do think now there's a lot of times that Nick Ehlers is the best player on the ice for the Winnipeg Jets. It happened a lot last season. I think we all expect it to happen this season. And on those nights, the Winnipeg Jets game plan should be crafted around getting him as many opportunities as possible. I want to see if he can operate at 21 minutes a night every once in a while, and maybe more and more. I know the argument is that maybe he's best at 17 and maybe coach knows best. I don't know if coach knows best until he tries something else, and that's what I want to see. I want to see the deck cleared to allow him to do what he can do. Ken, your response.
Just a quick one here, and I know what you're coming from, Sean. I know you did directly ask him about Ehlers to that answer, but to me, I don't think he was comparing Ehlers to situation to Stamkos. He was just using the comparison that, sometimes an elite player isn't playing first line minutes. I don't think that was a direct comparison. And I would also say that I think in some ways he may have been planting the seed for a reduction of Blake Wheeler's minutes, at least at 5-on-5 when he brought up the Stamkos comparison. But again, that remains to be seen, and we'll see if it develops that way. But that was my interpretation of the potential of what he said when he was referencing Stamkos.
Well, it's going to be hard to limit Wheeler's minutes when he's on the top line and on the number one power play. It won't be easy to do that if that's the case. So the way things are set up right now, I know what you're saying. It doesn't look like his actions suggest that that's the direction he's heading in. Guys, I'm going to switch things quickly here. We got to talk about Pierre-Luc Dubois because Jeff Hamilton brought him up, and I guess that's where I'll start with him or with this topic. Jeff, Pierre-Luc Dubois, last season, we're being told he never quite, launched the way they would have expected him to launch, and they're saying that it's essentially, a fitness issue. Do you buy that, and do you think that he has already fixed his problems with a great offseason and winning the take off the shirt contest that Paul Maurice likes to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea. Like, I have no idea if he's fixed the problem because we haven't seen him. All we know is what we've seen from him last season, and whether it was a fitness issue, whether it was a a quarantine issue, circumstances of joining a team late, learning new systems. He's young, so he thought when he got here, because he got traded for a guy like Patrick Laine, he had to do too much too soon. He needed to do everything. I think some of it's personnel related in that, with Columbus, he had two guys that were not as recognizable as the line mates he had in Winnipeg, and so they would play to his game. And whereas here he would have to, form his game around other players. Like, these are all what you call excuses. So to suggest because Paul Maurice said that he looked good physically and because he comes out and says, some of the things that plagued him last year are no longer an issue this year, including some, those things I said, plus, fitness wise, that it was all a workout issue and all these things. I mean, again, those are all excuses, none of which exist anymore. So whether or not Jeff Hamilton thinks he's going to come out and be the player that, we saw him in Columbus and whatever improve, there's definitely potential for that because of the lack of excuses. So I guess the expectation here is that he will be better. And I mean, ultimately he needs to be better. I mean, we've seen it. This is a big opportunity for him. Obviously, they've got some protected years under him, but he's playing for a contract. There's things that Pierre-Luc Dubois need to be significantly better at. And, we talked about this a ton last year. I mean, it wasn't like he might have had all these, perceived obstacles to get past, but he got everything else. He got the ice time. He got the opportunity. Like, he wasn't, you know what I mean? He got to play with different guys. He was moved to the wing, so he didn't have to take on as much defensive responsibility in his own end, particularly. So all those things are gone. So if he had a great offseason, if he feels much better, if he's more comfortable, if he has a training camp to kick off this season, and they're going to be surrounding him with players and giving him ice time and opportunity, there's absolutely no reason why Pierre-Luc Dubois should not have a turnaround year. Whether or not he's going to have one, we're going to have to wait and see.
Scotty, do you buy the turnaround is basically nothing more than a fitness issue?
I mean, a fitness issue. I think that's kind of pigeonholing one thing. Like, I think there was more than just that. I mean, all the things that Jeff listed there are. I think there was bits and pieces from all of those that kind of went into his season of his down year. But like, I think what people need to forget, like, I get it. Sports is always, what have you done for me lately? But look at the trend. I mean, look at his first 3 years in the NHL. This guy was positive possession guy, great at producing points. I mean, he played between some good guys. Let's not forget, this is a guy who played in between with Artemi Panarin. I mean, Artemi Panarin is one of the best players in the NHL. So it's not like this guy can't play with other good talent or whatever it is. I think you had a year that was like no other. I mean, I know that's a stupid cliche that's get thrown around a lot, but I mean, how else do you describe a year where he was quarantined, he came back, he got injured, then he came back? I mean, if you want to say that you're against, I mean, the guy played basically half a season last year, and half of a season, which is essentially what it turned out to be. So, but if you look at his past, I mean, how do we? I'm not sure why we doubt a guy who's put up good numbers in the past and had a year that was completely different based on a number of different variables, why he can't come back and do it. So, I mean, I guess what Jeff is saying, which is true, and the point that I took from what he's saying is like, okay, well, show us now, right? I mean, that's kind of where this lands. I mean, like you said, it is a contract year. It's a big year for Pierre-Luc Dubois in terms of making money, in terms of where he stands in the league, in terms of where he stands with the Jets and what happens with him after that. But he has a full training camp, and we've seen it through training camp, and I don't know if you guys will agree, but I think Pierre-Luc Dubois looked good in training camp. He's consistently played well with Ehlers when he's played, but we've only seen that in games a couple times. But in that, there's this growing chemistry with him, and I think that's part of it by design, because last year there was no consistency for Dubois, and he was shuffled around everywhere to try and make him work somewhere, and he never developed that with. So now he's got Kopp and Ehlers. Let's see where it goes. And I mean, if we're talking about this line being a 1A, 1B, are we not, going at the point where we think like this line is not a 1A, 1B if Pierre Dubois isn't a 70-point player this year? So I think if we're predicting that's what it's going to be, I think we're predicting that he will bounce back, and maybe some of those issues last year were real, and I don't doubt that they weren't. So
Well, Ken, predicting that Nick Ehlers is going to score 40 goals probably puts a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois,
Right.
his centerman, in the position of being a 70-point player. So how integral do you think the chemistry between those two players is in kind of resurrecting Pierre-Luc Dubois' season?
Yeah, and a great point, and we've all seen it here. The thing that fans have not been seeing, okay, well, it's been a little sluggish at times in the preseason games that he's suited up for. How about the one-on-one competitions, the 1v1, Sean? When Dubois' line was going against Scheifele in the preseason scrimmages, which line was holding the fort and which team won? I mean, again, we're not putting all kinds of stock into scrimmages either, but the Dubois line didn't always win the head-to-head, but their team won every single outing at the start of the training camp. So, I mean, that does count for something in the mental side when you're trying to build that chemistry. And I totally get it. People are tired of me making excuses for Pierre-Luc Dubois, and that's okay. But I'm going to leave one last thing out here that we've talked about. All the things that we talked about, whether it's fitness, change of address, revolving door of line mates, anyone who's had a bad breakup in their life, they can probably relate. This is his bad breakup. The team that drafted him 3rd overall, he basically was on the verge of signing an 8-year extension. Something broke down, and not only did it break down, he demanded to be traded and then was moved, and then also, as Jeff mentioned, dealt with the pressure, even though he tossed it to the side, of having to be trying to replace one of the most popular players in town. So I don't think that you could have had any other circumstances that would be considered anything to be as tough as that. But Jeff's right. Those potential impediments or excuses are gone. So now I think we're going to see the real Pierre-Luc Dubois, and now it's up to him to show that. But in terms of what it means for Ehlers, for sure, unless Ehlers is bumped to the top line, Dubois has to be a driver on that line in order for them to get to those offensive places that we anticipate they can go to. And I will also say, I know some people have been saying, well, there was a couple comments about Andrew Kopp. Andrew Kopp is not going to hold back either one of those players. He's going to help them because of his smarts and his defensive dependability when you have an elite level player and a guy who wants to be a first line center. So Andrew Kopp is not, even if Andrew Kopp doesn't score 25 goals, he's going to help that line immensely. So we'll see how it goes. But for me, Dubois is going to bounce back in a very big way. And I don't just say that because I defended him last year. We're going to see how it goes, and it's up to him. But as the comment goes, if you bought a Pierre-Luc Dubois jersey, you're probably going to be pulling it out of the closet at some point this year.
I'm going to say this. Kenny and I were very yin and yang last year on this. There were days that I took some heat from people because they got sick of me perceiving that I was bashing Pierre-Luc Dubois. I mean, I think last year, and this is something that fans do, they have this feeling that it's just around the corner. It's just around the corner. I never saw that last year. I didn't see anything out of Pierre-Luc Dubois that I thought he was about to turn the corner. And I'm going to be right honest with you guys right now. I think he looks better. I don't think he looks like what we all expected him to look like when he showed up here. I think people were thinking when Pierre-Luc Dubois showed up that the Jets were going to be an impossible puzzle to solve down the middle. Now, maybe they're going to get there eventually. From what I see so far in training camp, and again, it's training camp, take it with a grain of salt, I don't think he's there yet. I do think when you watch that line play, Nick Ehlers is the best player on that line. And I think that from what I've seen so far, I know they've got different duties, but I think Andrew Kopp and Pierre-Luc Dubois have been comparable. I never looked at for a second and thought that Andrew Kopp looked like, the anchor on that line, like some people are suggesting. I agree with you, Ken. He's the guy who's going to free up Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think that's why he's there. You get a guy with some defensive responsibility and try and get him up ice. But I wonder, and I started wondering, because someone brought up Patrick Laine in here, I wonder how much of this was a stylistic issue for both these players. The way that the Columbus Blue Jackets play is very different than the way that the Winnipeg Jets play. And you took two players who played very well on both those teams and flip-flopped them, and it was a disaster for both of them. So I will say this. I think Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to be better. I think that, an off-season of training, getting his body feeling better, even though I don't think, I'm going to say it right now, I don't hang on that excuse. I think what that is that's a power of positive thinking vibe that the Winnipeg Jets coach said to him, you know, you had a tough time last year. You had to sit in quarantine. You never kind of caught up. Go get in really good shape and everything's going to be fine. That's an example of controlling what you can control and trying to block everything else out. You can't tell me that Pierre-Luc Dubois did not have ample opportunity to get back up to speed. How many players go through injuries in a season, miss time, and come? My God, look at what Nikita Kucherov did after sitting out the entire season. You have time, and he had time to get back up to speed. I don't think for a second it was just that issue. That's them trying to block stuff out. But a year of working underneath that system, understanding what the Jets are going to do, trying to build chemistry with the guys that you're trying to build chemistry with, I think that that's going to serve Pierre-Luc Dubois well. But I will say this, I am at the stage right now that for Pierre-Luc Dubois to come in and be what everyone thought he was going to be, the guy that made them that impossible, riddle to solve down the middle, I have yet to see evidence of that yet, and I'm going to need to see a little proof of that down the stretch before I'm willing to run out and buy the Pierre-Luc Dubois jersey as you're talking about, Ken. Guys, we're over an hour. I'm okay to keep going for a little bit if you want to keep going. Is there anything pressing that we want to talk about?
I want to say one more thing about Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Get on it.
The mental part. So the thing that we don't really talk about with him is that, he came here, whether it's replacing Patrick Laine or whatever, he essentially, I didn't have the social aspect. It was COVID, that he's a young guy. So I think it's a lot there that he puts on his shoulders. And, we know all season long last year, can you imagine somebody asking you every second day, how do you think your season's going? Hey, how's life for you right now? You didn't figure it out last game. So there's an element of this offseason that maybe he's got a bit of a clear mental state. And I also think, but we also know Pierre-Luc Dubois doesn't like that we're asking him about his season last year. We know this.
Well, for sure. So and the coach has to vary it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why we know is that So I'm curious that if things don't go well for him early, what happens then? And so that's the only thing I'd say about him is I wonder about, I'm not challenging his mental toughness. I think what he went through last year was very, very difficult, especially for someone for his age. But I'm curious if things don't go well for him right away, how much of that has he figured out and, take things over with? Because I don't think if he starts getting into his head very similar to what we saw last year, it's a tough obstacle to surpass,
I see you didn't put this point up, Ken. Thanks for that.
I didn't see that one. Sorry, bud.
Sure. Selective sight. I got it. Guys, let's get into this. Let's kind of do this as a whole.
Have you talked Comrie yet? Have you done any of that?
We didn't talk Comrie, so let's do this. Let's talk Comrie, but let's also talk kind of the young guys and the bubble guys. So we should get into David Gustafson because, Ken, I want you to talk about David Gustafson because you were a guy last year and definitely in the offseason who was saying, it's time for this guy, and it clearly looks like that time is not now the way things are going. Let's talk about Ville Heinola. People want us to talk about Cole Perfetti. So I'm going to start with you, Scott, and you can take any of those issues that you want to talk about and run with it, and we're just going to kind of move through all these different things.
Ville Heinola I'll make some statements here. Ville Heinola not playing in the NHL this year as much as everybody wanted to is a good thing. I think this kid needs I shouldn't call him a kid. That's disrespectful. I think this player needs to be in the AHL, get a full season of hockey, and go from there. Is he good enough for the NHL? Maybe, but I don't think he's good enough yet to thrive in the NHL, and I think that's part of the issue because the Jets don't have the defense that they had 2 years ago when he shone so well in training camp or even last year. So they don't need that. Secondly, Eric Comrie, I think the leash is very short on him, but I also think that the Jets showed a tremendous vote of confidence in them by not going after Michael Hutchinson and getting a guy who at least they know could go and play. And here's the thing with Michael Hutchinson. He's making the same amount of money that Eric Comrie is. And so it's not like they had to try and finagle him into the roster. No, you just put Comrie on waivers and you go from there, bury him in the AHL because nobody else is going to take him at this point. So, I think there's two things. I think Eric Comrie has looked better as training camp has gone on. I just think we haven't seen it in a game yet. and that's the other problem. So, but I think the leash is short there. But I also think they have more trust in him internally than we do, kind of externally looking on. Those would be my two. But I think I know people are upset about the Ville stuff, but they were upset when Mark Scheifele didn't come in or Josh Morrissey didn't come in. And we have to look at this historical stuff with this team. I mean, Ville is good, but I just not sure.
Heinola.
Whatever. Heinola. But I think he's getting there. But give him a full year in the AHL to develop his game. Last year, what was his year last year? A lot of taxi squad. He played World Juniors, and he didn't play a lot of AHL. And so let him go in and do it, because I think this training camp, we've all seen it there. I don't think he looked great in this training camp. I don't think he looked ready when he was playing in the games that he's going to play tonight. So we'll see what happens there. But I don't think he sees the opportunity. And I think that's partly because the other guys in the lineup are one step ahead of him. And I will put Logan Stanley in that too, because I think Logan Stanley has taken a different step in that. And everybody else on the roster, not Nathan Beaulieu, I won't argue that point. But I don't think Nathan Beaulieu is going to play a lot of games this year, assuming people are healthy. So, anyways, those are the two that I think that need to be addressed at some point. So,
Hammy, tackle the young guys. Some of the guys, I don't know if you want to go Perfetti. Take it in any direction you want. What stood out to you with the way they've handled them in camp?
So for me, the way they've handled them in camp, Ville Heinola is a guy that deserves one thing. It's a lot of ice time. So unless he's able to get that at the Jets level, I mean, unfortunately, you can see the look on his face when we were talking to him, in one of the availabilities in training camp, like, what do you make of the summer? It's like, I went from here to here. And maybe, and so there's an argument, amongst fans, and I'm definitely on that board, where he should have got more ice time last year. Or, you know what I mean? Or if he was to get more ice time, it would have been last year. Now, for me, he needs to be with the Moose because he doesn't get the ice time up here. Now, is he an injury or two away? Possibly. And I think it'd be great news for him. But he's also 20 years old. And so, and I don't like limiting that, because we've seen guys kind of come up and do special things when given the opportunity. And you can certainly make the argument that he hasn't gotten that. But it's just unfortunate for him at this moment in his pro career, because he's just behind a bunch of guys that are established in the NHL. Like, the argument no longer is, well, why isn't he getting it off Nathan Beaulieu? Like, why is he playing over this guy? It's now, it's Dylan, and it's, it's Stanley now, and he's establishing himself. So it's like, you don't want to put him in the press box. You want to get him a ton of time. And if this guy is a full-time blue liner at 21 years old, I mean, he's ahead of the curve. But anyways, aside from that, because I know that debate's on both sides, Cole Perfetti, what a smart kid, what a down-to-earth kid. I think he's going to do something really special in this league. I think for him, this won't be the season. I think it'll be exciting for him to get in a few games, maybe early on, if they can, if they put him in that first game, maybe he gets kind of the Mark Scheifele treatment early on. But this guy is going to be good. He's going to be good because he's got a good head on his shoulder. He does things, like Paul Maurice said, that you usually have to teach guys at this juncture in their career. He's not a big guy, so putting him on, logging him minutes, doing certain things for at the NHL level. He's proven he can play at the AHL level. He's proven he can play on, the world stage. I use that lightly. We're talking about a world championship that was much different than previous years. As far as talent. But he's proven all those things. I think he's he would be going back to junior this year if it wasn't for COVID. So for him to get the Moose opportunity here is a luxury. You have a guy that's going to come in. You want to get those best years. I know fans don't like at the, that entry level deals. You want to get his best years. So you want to bring him up when he's ready. You want to bring, and he's going to be good. That's the good thing. I think one thing we haven't touched, and it's not the younger guys. I think it's fascinating what the Jets are doing with the third line now with Adam Lowry and Stastny and Vesalainen. Like, is Vesalainen going to be that guy? Like, is he going to be on that wing? Does he deserve to be on that wing?
Great question.
That's the big thing for me, because if that guy is not firing to a level which he clearly has not been doing in training camp, and I know they're going to be patient with him, and I know he's on, he's playing his offside as far as shooting, but if he isn't triggered, what is that line? How useful is that line if he's not going? How good is Paul Stastny going to be this year? And if, you guys were talking about it earlier about that heavy game, Do we turn them into a bit of a more skilled line, like a more setup line with Lowry in front of the net? I'm a little confused with with that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, if you're going to give more minutes to guys like Nick Ehlers, you ain't taking them from Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler and Kyle Connor. You're taking them from Adam Lowry, and you're changing the entire makeup of that line to allow for guys that are now in their prime, like Ehlers, like Kyle Connor, like those guys, to flourish with more minutes. So anyways, I know it's a little all over the place. I like the young guys and stuff. I think the fourth line's exciting. I agree completely with you too, Sean, when you said before that, now their issues are no longer their blue line. Their issues are their fourth line. And those are things you can address in season if you don't like what you have. But I also think we do this thing in training camp where we see these guys, whether we like their personalities or we like them on the ice, we inflate their value. It'll be very interesting. Everyone goes, well, Trevor Lewis's and those guys of the world, well, they were consistent last year. Like, I had no problem with this team's fourth line, but they're not. We're in a situation now where this team is heavy. They don't need the responsibility as much up front because of the defense they have. It's time to see what some of these guys are made of. And I love to see guys like Gustafson, which is probably not going to be a situation, but, but guys like, Shevchnikov, I think he looks really good. See some of these energy guys that really want it, right? Guys that you see night in and night out that really want it. And I think I'm not saying that guys don't want it, but that kind of fire, that kind of passion, I love that for that bottom line. And if you can get some energy going, I think you can really use that line if they can get some trust with Paul Maurice as the season rolls on.
Well, just to finish on that, and I think that's a huge thing, because in the last 2 years, they have not had a guy pushing them from behind that's coming up. So if Jansen Harkin, or let's say Svechnikov doesn't play, well, if Jansen Harkins or Vesalainen stumbles, I mean, they have a guy ready and hungry to go into the lineup. And they didn't have that in the last couple. Well, exactly. I'm just saying, using Svechnikov as an example, because he looks like he's the outside guy, maybe that 13th forward kind of going into the year. But, I think that's a big thing for this team. And also I'll make, maybe it's not that bold of a claim, but Cole Perfetti, he might be the Cole Caulfield of Winnipeg's playoffs coming up. And I know Kenny hates that one. That's a wake up.
No, I don't hate it.
I hate it. I hate it.
It's a year later.
Yeah, and I'll get into it. Let's let Kenny.
I don't hate it. I just don't think that this coach is going to play him like they would play Cole Caulfield in the playoffs.
Well, that might be true. But I think if Cole Caulfield can come in and play on that third line for the playoffs, if it's not working out somewhere there, I think you have something there. And I think Cole Perfetti, and Jeff said, he's so smart. Like, it's ridiculous to watch this kid play against like Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler, and he doesn't look out of place at 19 years old. That's ridiculous. And like we said this a couple years ago about Ville Heinola, but they didn't have
Heinola.
Wake up. But they didn't have that kind of
new t-shirt.
Just flash it. You don't even have to say it anymore. Just flash it, Ken. We should have little signs that we can like hold up. Wake up every once in a while, so you don't have to interrupt it like I'm doing right now. Go on, Scotty.
Anyways, but I'm just saying, like, I think that Cole Perfetti is a step above even the rookies that he's going to be playing with in the AHL this year. Like, we saw how good he was as an 18-year-old last year. How good is he going to be this year? And like Jeff said, and I've talked about this since the start of training camp and even before that luxury that Jeff said of going to the AHL, that's huge, because they would lose. And Chevy, when I asked him about this, like he said, it would be a detriment for him to go back to Saginaw. And the fact that he doesn't have to is massive for this team, for his development, and possibly as a trade deadline guy that you don't have to go and spend anything for. And so I think, and that's the other thing too, I was going to say on defense, because I wrote this down, the Jets this year, if you guys were talking about it earlier, I was listening to the show earlier about, not having maybe a big enough back end, like as maybe Montreal or whatever that did. I think they can go and address that at the trade deadline, not having to go after 2 top 4 defensemen or find that, because they found that now. So you can go get that big body Joel Edmondson or, reasonable facsimile and get that guy in and at the trade deadline now. So that was just another point. I wrote that down while I do research before I come in. I watched the show.
Well done.
Scott.
Well
Good
done.
for you. Ken, fire from the hip, or did you do some research too?
Did a little research for the show
Facebook
as well.
research.
The guys have touched on most of the points, and David Gustafson falls into the exact same category as Ville Heinola and Cole Perfetti. This is very simple. On a bad team, all three of those guys could be in the lineup right away without any question. If you have a Stanley Cup team, the Jets have the luxury, or contending team, the Jets have the luxury of sending those guys to the American Hockey League. If you're those players, are you disappointed? Of course, but guess what? Your best chance is to go down and dominate. This is a very simple process. You go down and hang your head for 3 months, you're not coming back to Winnipeg unless there is a catastrophic injury and someone else is not playing better than you. But all three of those players have the ability to turn this disappointment into fuel in order to play well, because all four of us know one simple thing. If you're playing great, they're going to find room for you to fit in. Whether that's via injury or somebody's underperforming, that's what you do. If you're Cole Perfetti, go down and dominate. If you're David Gustafson, of course you're disappointed you didn't have a lot of NHL caliber line mates during training camp on a year where you thought you were going to make the team. But you know what? Just keep doing what you do. David Gustafson makes the people around him better. So go down to the American League where they have some capable veteran players and some good young prospects and be a force. Be a two-way force. Keep using your shot, showing your offensive game. Be the best penalty killer in the American Hockey League. If you're Ville Heinola, guess what? Run the power play. Be a dominant force. Be better in your own zone. And force the Jets to make a decision. If you're Cole Perfetti, do what you do. You're an elite thinker. You're a smart guy. You're a great shooter. Scotty, the biggest difference between Caulfield and Cole Perfetti is elite level speed. Cole Caulfield has it. He's a little bit better finisher, but Perfetti has a great shot. We always talk about his smarts and his passing and his vision. Go back and take a look at that shot he ripped past Freddie Anderson when he was playing for the Marlies. This guy can shoot it. That's the similarity between Caulfield. I don't think he makes the same type of impact, but what people need to remember, Cole Caulfield is a year ahead of this development plan. He's a year older than Cole Perfetti. So Perfetti does need to go and dominate at the American League level where Caulfield was dominant at the university level in the NCAA. But they're different players, but they can make impacts on their team. It's not to say that Cole Perfetti is going to be a playoff performer for the Jets, but he could get himself into a position where he's under consideration. And if there is an injury, the Jets will not hesitate to use him. Hey, I get it. Would you love to see Cole Perfetti in Game 1 when Mark Scheifele's out just to have a glimpse at it? Of course you would, but coaches don't think that way. They're thinking about only winning that game. Paul Maurice, he doesn't have the luxury of thinking, you know what, if it doesn't work out, no big deal. For him, he thinks he needs to use Paul Stastny in that Game 1, and you don't blame him for it. You understand why. I mean, hey, I'd love to see Perfetti in Game 1 in that position. I also would have no problem if the Jets would play Perfetti on the third line when they move Paul Stastny up. But I also have no issue, having covered the American League for 10 years, if Perfetti is sent to the minors. Because guess what? He isn't going to light the NHL on fire at 19 right away. And I understand some people are saying, well, how do you know that? Well, I know that because I watched a lot of players at Cole Perfetti's level. They're not even in the American Hockey League at that level, let alone playing in the NHL. So it's going to work out for all three of those players. I think it's going to work out for all three of those players in Winnipeg, but I don't see it working out for them necessarily in Game 1 where they're dominant players in the NHL season this year. But they all know what they need to do, and I expect them to go out and do it.
I'm ready to run through a wall right now. After that.
Just a couple of things here. Kenny's water bottle since we're all together, which one of you guys was Maurice calling out for saying he doesn't play young players? He wasn't calling out us, he was calling out you, the fans, because he's hearing this all the time, the idea that he's always screwing up these young guys and all this kind of stuff. So that was his kind of the funny part about this, and guys, I know we've talked about this. The Jets will always say, like, we're not paying attention to this. We don't listen to the noise. They do. They do. I don't care what they say. And Paul Maurice says it all the time. He says he doesn't like to lie to us. I think that's a little white lie of his because he knows precisely what's going on. I don't think he's cruising Twitter, but the PR guy's jobs are to keep him informed. He's very well informed of how you all feel about how he's treating these guys. Kenny, to the point you made about Perfetti on the third line, I hate that idea. I think Perfetti is one of these guys that the Jets...
Not for the year, for a one game showdown, buddy. That's it. Not
Even
for the
that,
year.
I'm furious that you would say.
Why?
I'm just kidding.
Sorry, one quick one. I don't intervene, but how old was Patrick Laine? He was 18, but the Jets were bad. That's why Laine was on the team. They got the second overall pick, and they were bad. That's why he played at 18.
So this is what I'm saying. Paul Maurice likes to call guys up and put them in the position he wants them to play, right? Like someone brought up in the chat room earlier on Kyle Connor. Like, he tears up the AHL, and then they bring him up to play the same role he played in the NHL. In the cases where they didn't do that, the Jack Roslovics, where they brought him up from tearing up the AHL and then put him in a bottom six role, it doesn't work. I don't like the idea of doing that with those guys. I'm going to take my beef from Kenny to Scott. Scott, I hate it when you make comparisons between guys and the very best guys. You did it with Logan Stanley, saying he's the next Zdeno Chara. You're now saying it. You're saying it about Cole Perfetti being the next Cole Caulfield. Because guys are small and skilled doesn't mean they translate. Because two guys are 6'8" and do this, it doesn't mean they translate. Cole Caulfield fits into a situation where he's with like a guy who the vast majority of the league, not the league, of fans don't realize how good Nick Suzuki is. You are sheltered extremely when you play alongside Nick Suzuki, and you come in as a scorer, and there's no pressure on you to score because the team's best scorer is on the other wing. That Cole Caulfield works not only because he's phenomenal, not only because he's over-seasoned down in the NCAA, overseasoned.
Easy now.
Overseasoned.
Let me finish my point. I let you finish your ridiculous points. So he comes in and spends a year where they're talking about wanting to bring him up early all year, and they wait until that's done, and they bring him up in a situation. They don't start him with the team in the playoffs, and they make sure that his situation is ready and perfectly capable for him to handle it. That's how you bring in players like Cole Perfetti. So when you bring them in, you need to bring them into a spot where you know they're going to succeed and where you need them. And the Jets don't need them in that top six right now. You don't need Cole Perfetti. That's why he's not there. And I'll say it again. We heard it too last year. How many people in our chat room talked about Ville Heinola and said they did it with Cale Makar, just bring him up. Yeah. Just the next generation best defenseman did it. Why can't Ville Heinola do it? You can't be taking these guys and putting them in saying Cole Caulfield did it, so Cole Perfetti can do it too.
I'm saying that because of Cole Caulfield did it, that there is other players that can also do it. And you're talking about a guy who now...
You're talking about the 1%ers. You're saying, a guy did it. Hey, you know what?
Put Cole Caulfield into the lineup against Toronto when they were down 3-1 in the series. But they had
no other option. Connor McDavid put up that many points last year. He can do it. Someone else can do it. Mark Scheifele should do it this year too. No, it's
insane to think though that just because Cole Caulfield had a good season that nobody else can have it now. It's like this isn't lightning in a pan. These are good players.
It's more insane to suggest because he had a great season, everyone else can. That's what I'm saying.
A great season. He had a good playoffs, and he came in when they had nothing to lose, and so he played well. So the rest
I said this before. I said it with Kenny last year. I think that Cole Caulfield scores 30 goals this year. I'm not saying he's a one-off. I'm just saying we got to get away from this small player with skill. Jets have a small player with skill. He could be this guy. Big defenseman with size. He could be this guy. There is a long stretch. In order for Cole Caulfield or Cole Perfetti to do what Cole Caulfield did, Cole Caulfield had season. He had time with the World Junior program out of the States, and he got put into a perfect situation, shielded by players. So if you want that out of Cole Perfetti, you need to put him alongside guys like Mark Scheifele and you have to make sure that those guys can't be detracted from. So the question about Cole Perfetti going into a spot like that is, where is Mark Scheifele's defensive game, and can he handle that loss? Because that was the thing about Nick Suzuki. Nick Suzuki was so good at with his intuition and where he was playing on the ice that Cole Caulfield was freed up to do whatever he needed to do because it was being taken care of by Nick Suzuki. He was so good that he could do that. You need to make sure that situation exists just to give him the opportunity to be that, never mind whether or not he has the skills to be that guy. Yeah, that's right.
Sure.
For Hammer to be the most calm guy out of all four of us.
Sitting back enjoying it like the rest of the comment section. Yeah,
Comrie, hang on one second. One last one, and Scotty did touch on it. If the Jets believed Eric Comrie could do the job going into training camp, They've seen nothing, 7 periods, people are freaking out against, half NHL competition. You're not going to throw in the towel on that idea. He's going to get games. It's not to say he's going to get 20 starts before the Jets give up, but Eric Comrie knows his position. He's not guaranteed anything. Needs to play well when he's in there, but he deserves the opportunity to have a couple of games with a full lineup and a full defense core in front of him. So can he do the job? We don't know that. He doesn't know that. He's had 9 games of NHL experience. Now it's up to him to show that he can do the job. What we all know about Eric Comrie is that he will be prepared to do the job. Does that mean he's good enough to do the job? That's up to him, and that's what we're going to find out.
And I think it's also important, just one more thing on that I think the guys have taken to Eric Comrie.
Absolutely, yes.
You don't see it. A lot of fans won't see it because there's not a lot of people watching it. But there's a lot of, I don't want to call it shoulder or hand holding or whatever. That's not the right word. But there's a lot of, there's a rapport between the players. I think the guys are going to want to play well in front of them like they did with Laurent Burswau. Lauren. It's a French name, and he can't even speak French. But regardless, I can't get names right. I'm like Hustler.
This is broadcast, buddy. Come on, let's go up your game.
I'm not a broadcaster. I'm a guest. So anyways, but my point stands is I think that the guys are going to play well in front of Comrie to go because they want to. I think a lot of people, and including on this team, a lot of the guys are good friends with him. Scheifele, Morrissey. There's a lot of guys on this team that want Eric Comrie to succeed and to succeed at the NHL level, and I think they're going to try and do their best. But obviously, as Kenny said, it is on Eric Comrie to make the save, and that's exactly what he has to do. And he didn't make a lot of those, I would suggest, in preseason, but it's preseason. It's like Palmer says, it tells a lot of lies.
Jets are taking a massive gamble. That's my.
They are for sure. They are.
I don't, nicest guy in the world. So what? Right. Under 900 percentage. Like when push comes to shove, I don't think guys are going to play necessarily better in front of Comrie. In fact, he's going to play in the worst situations, the back-to-backs, the get back to the hotel at 3 a.m. He's going to be up because Connor Hellebuyck wants to play all 82 but can't do the 20 games or at least 15 of that. And I think at the end of the day, this is going to be one of those things where I liken it to the Bombers. It used to be a priority to have your number 2 goaltender. This is a money thing. This is a is a loyalty thing, which we know what True North can be. And but Eric Comrie has shown absolutely nothing to deserve a prominent spot on a Stanley Cup contender. That doesn't mean I think he shouldn't. We should wait and see how he's going to do. But at the end of the day, for a team that wants to win the Stanley Cup, like you got a guy with a sub 900 percentage as your backup. It's an important piece to the puzzle. Come playoffs, come all those things. So if he's going to be the guy that's going to back Connor Hellebuyck, he's going to have to improve big time quickly. And I just find it to be a massive deal.
Yeah, the Jets. No argument there. I just think, and I think they will address it. Like I said earlier, I think the leash is short on Eric Comrie. If it's not working, they're going to go to the well somewhere else to find a Forsberg or a Hutch, that type of guy that can come in on a small contract but has NHL backup experience. So
one last one on the goalies. None of us on this panel knew anything about Laurent Burswau. He had a sub 900 in very limited NHL action before he arrived and became one of the NHL's best backups. I'm not saying it's an equilibrium story, but it's something that we need to consider. Eric Comrie's never had the backing of being the number 2 guy going in. Now he has it. What is that worth? We'll see. Right? I mean, I'm with you, Jeff. It is a risk. Of course, it's a risk. In an era where many NHL teams are going to load management, right? They're going to load management. The Jets are still going to play Connor Hellebuyck 60-plus games. And if Connor Hellebuyck is the goalie of Team USA at the Olympics, you're talking about high-pressure, high games. When other teams are kicking their feet up, Connor Hellebuyck's probably playing in the highest leverage games outside of a Stanley Cup final. So what does that mean to the taxation? Maybe Eric Comrie needs 5 more starts because Hellebuyck's going to be playing at the Olympics. We'll see. But that's why they need to know that they have a number 2 guy that they can count on.
Yeah, but what if Connor Hellebuyck's not taking 600 more shots than any other goalie?
Also true.
Right? So that's the other thing. I think you can reduce Connor Hellebuyck's fatigue load by not, playing better defense in front of him. If he's seeing, 18-3 the other night isn't going to be the norm, but if it's 25 and 26 shots a night and not 35 and 36, I don't know what that does for a goaltender over the course of the season.
this is the fascinating thing about Hellebuck, guys. He thrives on heavy workload. So it's going to be an adjustment in a lot of ways for this year if they get back to that. And let's not forget, even in the 2017-18 year, the Jets were not overly great defensively, and their aggressive style led to tons of 2-on-1s against and breakaways where Hellebuck had to be great. So I think it's going to be fascinating to watch how that unfolds. And what's the number going to be? Is it going to be 62? Is it going to be 65? Is it going to be 58? I mean, all these things are going to be things that we learn sooner than later. I'm going to go over 60 on the over-under. And Hellebuck's playing tonight. Hellebuck-Markstrom, for those folks asking about the game tonight.
I think you guys make really good points. I love the idea of what Wade Flaherty can do with goaltenders. I think he's a magician. I don't think he gets anywhere near the credit he deserves in this league. Phenomenal human being, phenomenal at his job. Sorry, I'm just going to put this back up here.
Sorry.
Leighton Janice says it would be nice to get an actual goalie expert's opinion on Comrie. I'm going to tell you this, it would be, but I've actually talked to actual goalie experts about this, and one within the organization that told me he thought Eric Comrie was going to be the better of the two goaltenders between Comrie and Hellebuck. So you got to take even a goaltending expert's opinion with a grain of salt. And the last thing on the Connor Hellebuck and the workload thing, Ken, I think that's worth a 10-minute conversation in a future show, because the idea of a guy who loves discomfort playing behind a team that has put him through his share of discomfort in the last couple of years to now be behind a defense and a team that may not put him in nearly as much discomfort. I truly wonder how it's going to affect his game. Paul Maurice, I thought, made a really good point about Mike Richter was a goalie that loved high shot volume. Connor Hellebuck loves high shot volume. The numbers back it up, and he may not have that. It's going to be interesting to see how he responds to that. That's it, guys. I'm going to shut it down because my kids are jumping into the chat section and waving at me.
Does that mean it's time to cook dinner? Is that what that one meant?
We've got family in, and we've got to get out to a restaurant. So, guys, I really
happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. It's so much fun to be back. I'm so looking forward to spending time with all three of you on this show this season. It was great to have you guys back, Hammy and Scotty. It was phenomenal to have you guys. Thanks for joining in. We'd love to have you back. I hope you're going to be back a lot. And man, oh man, was it great to catch up with our chat room, who are a ton of fun as usual. I hope we made it entertaining for you. Scott, I was kind of just picking at you just a little bit just to get that excitement going. I thought that we could get a little bit of scrap going. Yeah. So that's anyways, I hope everyone liked it out there. We're glad to have you back. We're going to be back full time after games. We can't wait to spend more time with you. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.